Well, that was a fun 70 hours of playing, followed by a half hour of rambling, but pretty exhausted by Zelda. What should I talk about next? Yeah, I guess that'll do. Probably should have waited a little longer to start these.
This is the Nintendo 64. Released in 1996, this console was absolutely decimated by Sony's PlayStation. That system used CDs, had a controller design that doesn't give you a stroke, the ability to play music CDs, and it was released 2 years earlier. Despite that, the Nintendo 64 said, "Wouldn't it be funny if some of the most enjoyable games of all time belonged to me?" Super Mario 64, Mario Kart 64, Super Smash Bros, GoldenEye 007, Yoshi's Story, Mario Party 1, 2, and 3, Donkey Kong 64, Pokemon Snap, Pilotwings 64. I won't say all of these games are some of the best of all time, but they're all such fun experiences. The Nintendo 64 had an incredibly high quality library of games that I wouldn't say are perfect, but are some of the most joy-filled, enjoyable games out there. And then there were 2 Zelda games.
The Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time, and Majora's Mask. These are the Nintendo 64's 2 Zelda games, and in my opinion, not just the best games on the system, but some of the best games of all time. That being said, it's pretty hard to talk about one without talking about the other. They're pretty similar in many ways. They both take place consecutively within the timeline, they both share many assets and music. Hell, they both may have been developed by Nintendo.
Let's start with Ocarina of Time, because how could we possibly start with this? Ocarina of Time was to be the 5th Zelda game, following up Link's Awakening. Nah, Ocarina was more so a follow-up of A Link to the Past, but this time, in 3D. Ocarina of Time was developed by Nintendo EAD, Nintendo's big in-house development studio. It was being developed alongside Super Mario 64 and originally used the same engine, but it was so heavily modified that producer and series creator Shigeru Miyamoto considers Ocarina of Time's engine separate from Mario 64's. The team was shooting for the game to be 16 megabytes large, which back then was pretty big. Nintendo 64 cartridges could only hold 64 megabytes, and even that would be expensive, so lower file sizes were shot for. And with a goal of 16 megabytes, the development team had concerns about 16 being too small, so at one point they considered having the game structured similarly to Super Mario 64, where there's a hub world in the form of Ganon's castle, with painting-like portals that led to each area. Thankfully, they switched to shooting for 32 megabytes, so the data concerns were no longer an issue. Its development was a long and arduous one. Transforming the series to work in 3D wasn't easy, but Ocarina of Time would go on to be considered one of, if not the greatest game of all time.
That's big talk for any game, let alone one that's a quarter of a century old. Now, I've played through this game twice before. First the 3DS remake, then the Nintendo Switch Online port, but I haven't actually played it on the original system, so let's go ahead and give it a spin.
Well, popping it in and oh god, I have to use this thing again.
We're off to a bad start.
Ocarina of Time starts with one of the most iconic title screens of all time. Link rides Epona across Hyrule Field as the title theme swells over. The theme has this odd sense of familiarity and nostalgia. It feels like you're returning to an old home. Even as someone who didn't grow up with this game, this title screen makes me feel like I did. Then the file select screen has the fairy fountain theme. God, I miss this. I love Tears of the Kingdom, but man, I wish I had the fairy fountain theme on the menu screen. And on with the game. It starts with some crazy shit. Link is having a nightmare.
What a little bitch.
And this giant ass tree, the great Deku tree, sends a fairy for Link. Meet Navi, everyone's least favorite.
Hey, listen.
Navi is well known for being hated. She just won't shut up. She's always bothering Link with some useless information. She's so annoying, it's iconic. She wakes up Link telling him to go to the Deku tree, and it's time for gameplay. So, what's the first gameplay in a 3D Zelda game? Get loaded! Yeah, so you're supposed to go through the Deku tree, but this asswipe Mido won't get out of your way. Like, how is this possible? So you have to find a sword and enough rupees to buy a shield. Thank God I didn't have this game as a kid, I would have been dumbfounded. Gather that stuff and he finally lets you pass and you go to the Deku tree where he dumps exposition onto you. Surprise, surprise, you're the hero and must beat the evil.
Oh, come on, I just wanted to break the economy. Is that too much to ask?
The Deku tree then has you go inside of him for the first dungeon.
I'll go in depth on dungeons later, but for now, I just want to run through the actual story.
You go inside the Deku tree because he's being infected, so you destroy the infection.
Hey, do you think trees can afford health insurance? I mean, I don't even think they get benefits.
After you save him, he dies.
You made a child do all that for nothing? What an asshole!
You leave the village, and before you do, you're stopped by your childhood friend Saria, who gives you an ocarina.
What a nice gift from a childhood friend. I'll cherish this for the rest of my days.
You head to Hyrule Castle, where you sneak around to meet up with Princess Zelda, who tells you that she doesn't trust this guy Ganondorf.
Why would you? Not that his name looks evil, or he looks evil, or he's literally the reincarnation of evil, but, like, his name is stupid. I mean, Ganondorf Dragmire? Like, would you trust someone called Butt McGee? Yeah, that's what I think.
You're then escorted out by Zelda's caretaker, Impa. So you're sent off to gather sacred stones. You got 1 from the Deku tree, and you need 3 to unlock a door in the Temple of Time. So off to Death Mountain, where you meet the Gorons. You meet with their leader, Darunia, who won't listen to you until you play him a song you learned from Saria. He finally tells you what's up, and you go to the dungeon to fix the Gorons' issue and get the sacred stone. Same with the Zora. The Zora Princess Ruto has gone missing, and it turns out she's been giving fish to the Zora Lord Jabu Jabu. So you get sucked inside of Jabu Jabu and save Princess Ruto to get the last sacred stone.
And man, I just gotta say, what a happy game so far. I mean, the Deku tree dying, that's kind of dark, but besides that, well, we helped the Gorons and the Zora. This has been a pretty fun, lighthearted adventure. I'm just a kid in a magical world. I got some sacred stones that I'm gonna take back to the princess, and then we're gonna save the— oh my god.
Upon arrival to Castle Town with the sacred stones, Zelda is fleeing with Impa, and Ganondorf is chasing after her. Ganondorf has betrayed the king and is now after Zelda, who threw something in the water. It's an ocarina.
No thanks, I already have a perfectly good working ocarina. Nothing is— oh my god, this one is blue?
With a new ocarina in hand, you head to the Temple of Time, where you unlock the door and gain access to the Master Sword, but upon trying to pull it, you are sent to some weird sacred realm where you meet Rauru.
He's from the new game!
This seems to be a completely different Rauru, however. This one is the Sage of Light, like he was in Tears of the Kingdom, but he seems to be Hylian, and he was also an owl called Gepora Gabora, similar to Gepora, a character from Skyward Sword who looks like Rauru, but not Rauru from Tears of the Kingdom, Rauru from Ocarina of Time, the game that I'm talking about. Confused?
Welcome to the club.
Rauru exposition dumps what's up. The sword won't let Link wield it until he's older, so it basically held Link in place for 7 years so he could age. In that time, it left the gate to the Sacred Realm open, and Ganondorf slipped into it and tried to take the Triforce, but to get the Triforce, the wielder must have a mix of strength, wisdom, and courage, to which Ganondorf only had strength. So the Triforce split with a piece going to each of the 3 worthy wielders of each piece. He still took over Hyrule and put each race into woe. To stop him, you must find all the sages, as their combined power can imprison him. So you set out to find 5 sages, all who played an important role in Link's childhood. Saria, Darunia, Ruto, Impa, and Naboru, a Gerudo who you briefly interact with at the beginning of one of the dungeons. You also work with a ninja-type character, Sheik. She teaches you songs to fast travel and ultimately ends up being Zelda. Ganon then captures her, and it's time to save her, so you work your way through the castle, ascending it and battling him. After defeating him, the castle collapses and you have a couple of minutes to escape with Zelda. After doing so, the tower completely topples over and Hyrule is seemingly saved. But Ganondorf is still alive and uses his piece of the Triforce to turn into simply Ganon. With that, the battle for the fate of Hyrule begins. Literally. The Zelda timeline splits during Ocarina of Time, with one of the paths branching out from this fight. If Link dies to Ganon, the sages trap Ganon in the Sacred Realm as a last-ditch effort where he remains and the story picks up in A Link to the Past. So if you want to play through this outcome of the Zelda timeline, you have to die in this fight.
Alright, Ganon just whooped my ass. Now into A Link to the Past.
But if you're not horrible at the game, Link defeats Ganon and he's sealed away until Wind Waker. Yay. Zelda then sends Link back to his time so he can live through the rest of his childhood after it was taken from him, which is where the other split occurs. In Zelda's timeline, Ganon stays sealed until he breaks free, which is talked about in Wind Waker's prologue, and Link was sent back to his time, so there's no hero to oppose Ganon, so the gods flood Hyrule and make Zelda for babies. And in Link's original timeline, he rats out Ganondorf, which leads to Twilight Princess, and Link himself goes off into another polygonal adventure.
And that's the game's story. I didn't go into the nitty-gritty of all the details of the story, because if you want that, just play the fucking game. And speaking of playing the game, I should talk about how the game plays.
With this being the first 3D Zelda game, there was a lot of things that had to be done to make the game work. The story structure and the sense of exploration and how the story progresses as you go throughout the world is similar to that of A Link to the Past. As you work your way through the game, you obtain items that unlock more areas of the world to explore, much like Metroidvanias.
Like Metroid, Castlevania.
And like A Link to the Past, there are technically 2 worlds. One being the past where Link is a child, and one being the future where Link is an adult because he's 17.
Thank God I don't live in Hyrule. If I did, I'd have to pay taxes.
The past and present are pretty similar, with only a few areas being different. Mainly Hyrule Castle Town, it's in ruins, overcome by Redeads, and now Ganon's castle sits there. Besides that, many NPCs are in new locations, but as the story progresses, they move back to where they originally were. I forgot how similar the past and future of Ocarina of Time were to each other. It's not like A Link to the Past where there are entirely different buildings and whatnot, it's just the normal world with Castle Town and ruins. Not crazy exciting, can't wait for them to make the second world type place interesting again in 25 years. Now the gameplay itself, yeah, adjusting to 3D sure does change a lot. Of course, you can now move in a 360-degree space, but with the introduction of 3D came new staples of Zelda like the roll. Anytime you're running, slam that A button and Link will roll. Why?
Because it's slightly faster than running.
Similarly to prior Zelda games, you have to go into a separate menu to select items, but unlike prior games where you can only hold one item, you can now hold 3. They're mapped to the C buttons and they work great for that. With them being buttons, it feels much more natural to use them. Playing this game on any future piece of hardware is awkward if you can't do button mapping because then you're forced to use the analog stick for these items, but on our original controller, it works perfectly. The last C button is used to go into first person or for Navi when she has useless information to tell you, like how I'm about to talk about camera control.
We know.
With the C buttons being used up for items, that leaves the camera control up in the air, to which this game said, what's a camera? Shigeru Miyamoto felt that the C buttons didn't need to be a camera in Ocarina of Time because the focus is more on the world. Ocarina of Time is more so designed to have the camera pointing in the direction that Link is moving. The core of the game isn't platforming, so the camera always being behind Link if possible isn't an issue. But what can be an issue with this non-controllable camera is attacking enemies. A problem developers ran into during development is that with the game being in a 3D space, enemies can disappear off camera. It's not like earlier Zelda games where you can always see whatever enemy you're facing. If you can't see them on screen, they're not an issue. With the jump to 3D, it poses that issue of them being off screen, and even if they are on screen, it can be harder to hit them because there's so much more space to miss. So to mitigate that, they created the miracle of Z-targeting. Z-targeting will lock onto an enemy so the camera is always focused on them and Link will strike at them when prompted. Z-targeting is one of the greatest innovations in all of gaming. It's something we still see these days in both Zelda and other games. And if there's no enemies around, Z-targeting will focus the camera directly behind Link, so if the camera isn't working right, you have that to fix it. Besides that, the game plays pretty similarly to the older game. Link can now jump if he runs off a ledge, he can climb things that are a bit taller than him, he can use a horse, Epona to get around Hyrule faster, and to color, he needs to use the Ocarina. Saria's Ocarina and the Ocarina of Time are both items you can play songs on. The main songs are each of the elemental songs, playing them warps you outside of each dungeon, and speaking of which, why not go in depth on each of them?
Because I'm tired.
Inside the Deku Tree, as the name suggests, you're inside the Deku Tree. It's the first dungeon and a bitch basic one. It's super short and easy, but is the perfect first 3D dungeon. It teaches you the core mechanics of the game and how the dungeons work, and it also has a unique theme. How many Zelda dungeons take place within a tree? The boss is Goma. Again, super easy, but a great boss for the first dungeon that's all about teaching you the core mechanics of the game. Dodongo's Cavern. This one is a bit more boring. It's a pretty generic fire cave dungeon. It's not bad, and I'm glad it's not the first dungeon, but damn is it forgettable. The most memorable part is that you eventually open the giant Dodongo skull and go inside of it. That's pretty cool. The boss is against King Dodongo, and it's another simple but still enjoyable fight. Then there's Lord Jabu Jabu's Belly, one of the most infamous dungeons in the whole series. The dungeon takes place within a fish's intestinal tract. I'm sorry, I love this dungeon's name so much. It's so silly and nasty and I love it. What I don't like is Princess Rudo. This is definitely the most infamous part. For a good chunk of the dungeon, you must carry Princess Rudo on your head. You can't use any items or anything, it's painful. And the boss is Baronade. It can be a tough fight, but my God, is this boss boring. And that's it for the child dungeons, but the adult dungeons, These are the more generic temple-esque dungeons you would expect to find in a Zelda game. Take for example the Forest Temple. This is an abandoned mansion castle place, I don't know, but it's pretty neat and the boss is super fun. Phantom Ganon, you're in a circular room with a bunch of paintings and Phantom Ganon will appear in some of the paintings riding towards the front. You have to find the real Phantom Ganon and shoot at him before he can leave the painting. After that, he ditches the horse and you play tennis with him. The Fire Temple, all the Gorons are in prison and you have to release them from their cells. This dungeon is great because of that alone. I like this one and the boss is Volvagia. It's fine I guess. Cool design, but the fight is just alright. Now the Water Temple. Oh, another infamous one. This is my favorite Zelda dungeon of all time. I'm sorry. The gimmick of this one is the Iron Boots. Wearing them will sink Link in the water and you can use them to gain access to various passageways to get keys and everything you need to beat the dungeon. Now the problem is to equip the Iron Boots, you have to pause the game, equip them, and unpause the game. I mean, it's kind of annoying, but you already do that so often for items already, so it never really bothered me. It was fixed in the 3DS remake, but that's for later, so please get out of here. And the other big part of the dungeon is raising and lowering the water level to access certain areas. I really like the puzzles here, and the mini-boss. Oh, there's a reason why I never mention any of the prior mini-bosses.
They f***ing stink.
They're not bad, but they're just not crazy memorable. But the water temples, you went to the room that seems like an infinite body of water with a single tree in it. Run past the trees to the locked door, so you head back towards the tree in confusion. Then as you approach the tree, Dark Link appears and it's a one-on-one fight with your Dark Alter Ego. Oh man, this is such a cool fight. And the dungeon boss, Morpha, it's a tentacle amoeba and you can pull out a nucleus and hit it. It's such a lame boss to finish off a wonderful dungeon. The Shadow Temple, there's also a mini dungeon in Kakarika Village where you fight my worst nightmare.
Rated E for everyone. Reasons include something a possessed kindergartner would draw.
The Shadow Temple follows it and it's okay. You do ride a boat, that's pretty fun. It's dark and gloomy and depressing. I miss when I was a kid inside of a fish's intestinal tract. The boss is Bongo Bongo, 2 hands that know what the playing bongos. Kill it.
Just leave him alone. He's probably practicing for Donkey Kongo when that comes out. Well, was.
And the Spirit Temple. You do the first half as young Link, get the dungeon item, then this Gerudo lady Naburu gets kidnapped by witches, so you revisit the dungeon as an adult, do the rest of it, and fight Kwame and Katake, Ganondorf's caretakers. And they turn into Twin Rova, a pretty fun final standard dungeon boss. And Ganon's castle is technically a dungeon in a way. It seems to be what came of there being a hub world. I mean, it's Ganondorf's castle with 7 little areas dedicated to each stage. They're just little 1 or 2 room puzzle gauntlets, but they're quite fun. Then after that, you work your way to the top, yada yada yada, you know the rest, and those are the dungeons. And for the first 3D Zelda dungeons, they're very good. They aren't perfect, but for a first rodeo in the 3D realm, these are quite fantastic.
Besides that, there isn't a whole lot with Ocarina of Time. That being said, Ocarina of Time is still an amazing game. It's not just one of the best games on the Nintendo 64, it's also one of the best games of all time. It is a triumph for the first 3D Zelda game, and even these days it can still be argued that it's the most pure 3D Zelda game. Games like Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, and Skyward Sword have a ton of bloat, and Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom have non-linear structures. That's not to say those games are bad, but when it comes to being a pure 3D Zelda experience, Ocarina of Time is the closest you get to that without any of the bloat that the later games had. It's aged brilliantly, it's so fun. The dungeons are fantastic, not just for being the first 3D Zelda dungeons, but even these days they still hold up really well. It is a damn near perfect Zelda game, and one of the best. But then Majora's Mask had to come out and top it.
The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask came just 2 years after Ocarina of Time. Majora's Mask originally started as Ura Zelda, a Master Quest-esque version of Ocarina of Time being developed for the Nintendo 64 DD. But as development progressed, it shifted over to a standard cartridge. It had a really short development cycle, one that was very rough on Eiji Aonuma. And there was a ton of things done to fill the game with content in a short amount of time. The big thing was having the game revolve around a 3-day time loop, with certain quests only being able to be done at certain times. Another thing done was the major reuse of assets, character models, and music. While there are plenty of new ones, a lot of them are reused from Ocarina of Time. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, I guess. The game was also more technologically advanced than the average Nintendo 64 game, as it required the expansion pack, this little guy that adds a whopping 4 megabytes of power.
Now, that's a powerful console.
This thing is stupid expensive for what it is. $50 for this? I paid $60 for just a Nintendo 64 console and it came with the expansion pack. Well, after a really short development cycle, The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask released on October 26, 2000 in North America, not even 2 years after Ocarina came out.
That's not a great sign. This game is clearly rushed and it still turned out to be one of the best games of all time. What the hell happened?
Well, like Ocarina, let's start with the story. It picks up with Link after he was sent back to his time. He returned the Master Sword, snitched on Ganondorf, but Navi also left with her quest being complete. But now Link is looking for Navi, which is quite sad. Navi is the one who understands what Link went through. Being a kid then forced into a dark adult world plagued with misfortune and death, this game was an allegory of growing up, and Link was the mind of a child who had to face the horrors of the adult world.
Like taxes.
So Link is off to find Navi, but some fairies, Tattle and Tail, kick him off his horse. It turns out they're working with Skull Kid, who has a creepy mask on. He steals Link's ocarina and horse, so you chase after him, falling down a pit. He then turns you into a Deku scrub and runs away, leaving Tattle behind, and thus, Tattle becomes your new fairy companion. So you go through a cave learning the Deku scrub mechanics, and eventually climb up a clock tower. And, oh yeah, you can play as different races. You're forced to place a Deku scrub in this first part, which is a bit lame. You can use these flowers to pop up high in the air and slowly float down, and you also can bounce on water. And don't forget spin hopping. If you spin while running into water, you hop super fast, which is super fun and satisfying. Goron, oh man, this is so fun. You can punch, ground pound, and best of all, roll. Keep on rolling for a certain amount of time and you break into a super fast powerful roll, which is so fun to use. Playing as a Goron is so fun. And the Zora, making swimming super fast and fun, allowing you to be in underwater places. Being able to play as these three other races is such a great mechanic that allows for amazing puzzles and are a ton of fun gameplay variety. There are more masks, but those are the main ones, and I'll talk about the others later. But on the topic of mechanics, the 3-day cycle. So the in-universe reason for the 3-day cycle is that a moon is going to crash in the Termina.
Yeesh!
There is no f***ing way you said that.
I said what I said.
So you have 3 days to do whatever. The Ocarina is back and has even more uses, with the most important being the Song of Time, which sends you back to the first day and allows you to save. That's the only way to save. Yeah, f***ing stupid. You can do quick saves with some statues, but those are only a one-time use, so the only permanent save is the Song of Time. Kinda dumb, but whatever. And when you reset, everything resets. Quest progress and dungeon progress and all of your items. Arrows, bombs, nuts, all gone, and even rupees. Now there is a bank to deposit and save rupees. I guess that bank had been the fabric of reality. Yeah, mine can too. But everything else, yeah, that's gone. Key items stay, but you have to restock on everything else, which I never found to be an issue, because if you need an item, the game will supply it near where you need it. It's not that big of an issue. Now to save time, you can play the Song of Inverted Time. Normally it takes about an hour for the 3-day clock to run out, but with the Inverted Song of Time, it slows down time, which is super useful, especially if you're in a dungeon. With the Inverted Song of Time, I never found the time limit to be an issue. It was a bit stressful, but it also helped me accomplish more and be more ambitious. I try to do the most I can within a cycle. Multiple events only happen at certain times, so for that, you can play another song to skip ahead in time. It sends you to the beginning of the next 12-hour interval and can be really useful. So, back to Clock Tower. As you leave, you're stopped by a creepy guy, the Happy Mask Salesman. He gives you an exposition dump. He had Majora's Mask, it was stolen by Skull Kid, and he needs the mask back. But he's only going to be in town for 3 days, so you need to get it before that. So you're sent out and you're launched into the first 3-day cycle. And with that, welcome to Clock Town, the single village the game is set around. This is the core of Majora's Mask. It's at the center of the map, and there are a ton of quests here. But none of that can be done within this first cycle. Rather, what you do is simple. Return a fairy to the fairy fountain. The great fairy teaches you how to blow snot bubbles. Play hide and seek with these kids called the Bombers so you can access their secret hideout. Talk to the astronomer in the hideout and get the moon tea that falls outside. Give it to a Deku for his flower, then wait at the clock tower for midnight on the 3rd day. At that time, the clock tower opens and you go up to confront Skull Kid. All you can really do is get back your ocarina, and then you have a flashback to Zelda teaching you the Song of Time, a song to play, and the Goddess of Time will help you. So you do that and you're sent back to the clock tower on the 1st day. Now that you have your ocarina, the Happy Mask Salesman teaches you a song to turn you back into a human, and then chokes you because you didn't get Majora's Mask. He gives you another chance though when you're finally set loose in Termina. Yes, welcome to Termina. It's heavily theorized what Termina is. Some say it's an alternate reality of Hyrule, some say it's Link in Purgatory. I don't know about that. I view it as more of some weird alternate reality made up of Link's memories, hence why so many characters look the same. And the character models being reused is pretty funny as they're all recontextualized to have a new purpose. Spirit Temple boss Kwame Katake now run a potion shop and boat tour, the Cuckoo lady now runs an inn and her fiance has disappeared, and then there's Tingle, one of Majora's Mask's new characters. I love him so much. He's weird and creepy, and that's what I like about him. He sells you maps, which I do like how they turned that into a mechanic. Anyways, this story, it's pretty interesting. There are 4 main areas that branch off from Central Termina, each with troubles. In Woodfall Swamp, the water is poisoned and the Deku princess has been kidnapped and a poor monkey is blamed.
Oh, poor guy. He probably just wanted a banana. You get it? Because he's a monkey.
It's not funny.
Shut the hell up.
The Goron village is overcome with snow when it should be springtime. Azor woman's eggs were all lost, and Akana Canyon is full of The Walking Dead on Blu-ray. Each area plays similarly. You just have a series of stuff that leads you to learning a song that unlocks a dungeon. Do the dungeon to revert the land to what it once was, and I must say, I love how each area's quest works. Through them, you're helping each race. You're saving an innocent monkey and returning the Deku princess back home. You return the Goron's village in the springtime. You help Lulu get her children back. The way you help people really adds to the feeling of heroism Link has.
I won't go in depth on everything that needs to be done to unlock each dungeon, but I will go in depth on each dungeon because, god damn, these are just some of the best dungeons in the whole series.
Woodfall Temple is the first dungeon and is damn good for a first dungeon. It doesn't have a crazy exciting theme or gimmick, but it's just a solid first dungeon, which is what it should be, and using Deku Link throughout the whole thing is a blast. The boss is Odola, this weird dancing creature that has no definitive way to defeat it, leading to a super fun fight. You can throw whatever you have at him, if it works, it works. It leads to a super fun fight with a lot of room for experimentation. And the noises he makes are so weird, I love them so much. Snowhead Temple revolves around this giant pillar that you have to punch some rows out of to lower it enough to reach higher places of the dungeon. I've always had a soft spot for this one, it's a blast. And the boss is my all-time favorite Zelda boss, Goat. It's a giant mechanical goat. He runs around in a giant circle and you chase after him as a Goron. It's such a fast-paced fun fight and I love it so much. The Great Bay Temple, another kind of infamous one. I love this one too. It revolves around this giant whirlpool and you have to make it go different directions in order to access different parts of the dungeon. The boss is Georg, a giant fish. It's okay. I don't hate it, it's just not a crazy memorable fight. And the last dungeon, Stone Tower Temple. It's pretty fun. You use all of Link's forms, leading to some great puzzles, and this dungeon's gimmick is that you flip it upside down. It's stupid cool to see the dungeon recontextualized upside down, and it also leads to some creative puzzles. And the boss is Twin Mode. You use another mask, the giant mask, and it makes you huge. It's an easy fight, but a damn fun one. You're just big as shit, and you swing your sword around hitting its head and tail.
And those are the dungeons. It's not many. I mean, it's 4, but they're still fantastic. They have some of the most creative and enjoyable bosses in the whole series. They all have unique themes and wonderful puzzles and music that make them all so good. This game killed it in the dungeon department, and it makes Breath of the Wild's 4 copy and paste dungeons that much more pathetic.
From completing each dungeon, you free one of the giants, 4 mythical beings who can help save Termina from the moon. Once you've done all the dungeons, the giants come out and stop the moon from crashing into the ground, and you go up to the moon where it's a grassy field with one singular tree, and a bunch of kids running around with masks of each boss. I'll explain their purpose later, but the kid in the middle alone is wearing Majora's mask, and talking to him starts the 3-phase final boss, and my god, I love this fight. From the music in Majora's form, you can tell what Majora thinks of Link. It's so good. The first phase, Majora remains in mask form. The music is slower and it's a simple phase. Majora still doesn't think you're jack shit, and it thinks it can take you as just a mask. But you whoop its ass, so it takes the form of Majora's incarnate, a more humanoid creature and a really silly one. It dances around and the music sounds oddly playful, like part of it is being played on a xylophone. Here, Majora thinks it's now one since it's taking a form more than a mask. It's not trying crazy hard because of how weak it assumes you are, hence why it's dancing. In the final phase, he finally sees your tough shit and puts up a fight. It grows a head, beefs up the muscles, and grows arm whips. And this phase is tough. The music revs up to be quick and stressful. Majora now knows your potential and is genuinely trying to stop you. I love how each music fits the phase and adds some character to Majora, it's brilliant. But one last good strike and it's all over. Majora evaporates and the moon returns to its place in the sky. You and Skull Kid awaken and no hard feelings since Skull Kid was under Majora's control. Tattle and Tail are reunited and the Happy Mask Salesman has Majora's mask back now, so he heads out, randomly disappearing as one last weird act from him. And roll credits where all the citizens of Termina are celebrating, and these credits are brilliant since you see everyone you helped. It truly does make it feel like a hero seeing everyone you helped at peace.
But let's slow down a minute because I barely talked about helping people, which is a big thing you do in the game. So, how do you do it? What do you get for it?
The main thing is the collection of masks. There are of course the story masks, but also some others that have special abilities. Some are very useful, like the Great Fairy Mask. In each dungeon, there are 15 fairies that need to be returned to each region's Great Fairy, and doing so will net you a prize. And the Great Fairy Mask attracts each fairy to you. A lot of the masks aren't as useful. A lot of them just allow you to get an extra heart piece and play roles in other quests, but how do you get the masks? Well, from helping others. Characters will give you masks as reward, which is a great reward for doing side quests, but also fit perfectly within the story of Majora's Mask. The masks are referred to as vessels of happiness. Each mask is a physical token of someone that you made happy, which makes collecting all of them super rewarding. My favorite non-transformation mask is the bunny ears, which lets you run faster, but it's the quest behind it that makes me love it. To get it, you go to the ranch and use another mask to march around playing your ocarina and gathering baby chicks. The chicken tender is sad because you'll never see his baby chicks when they're all grown up, but as you gather the chicks, they all suddenly grow up. And with that, you make the chicken tender's last wish come true. This one has always stuck with me, and it makes Link feel like more than a hero who fights evil. He also helps others, even with something as simple as helping chickens grow up. This man is about to die, and all he wants to see is his baby chicks grow up, and Link makes that happen. It makes collecting every mask so rewarding, on top of the ultimate reward. For collecting every mask, you get one final mask. On the moon, you can give other kids some masks and do challenges based on each race. A flying challenge with Deku Link, a swimming challenge with Zora Link, a combat challenge with normal Link. This stupid shit. This one took me hours when I first did it. My God, it's so difficult. I can't believe it. It took me so many tries, but I finally did it. And the ultimate reward is the Fierce Deity's Mask, an overpowered mask that turns you into an ancient warrior who, in the manga,
God, I hate saying that,
killed the dragon Majora and carved the mask out of its hide. Fierce Deity and Majora are like an ancient rivalry, but with Fierce Deity, you whoop Majora's ass. It's so easy with the mask, but it's also super hard getting the mask, so it's a trade-off. You can only use it in boss areas though, which is a bit of a letdown, but it's still a great reward. Besides that, there are a ton of heart pieces that you also get from doing side quests, but that's kind of it.
There's a lot I didn't talk about because there's a lot I don't want to say about Majora. One of my favorite things when I first played through Majora is how much I didn't know and how much the game would shock me. It's so good. So many of the quests made me happy, sad, hell, some of them made me cry. Yeah, I'm a bitch. If you haven't played this game for whatever reason, I beg you, please do. It is one of the best Zelda games, even with how different and unique it is. Just play it! And that is The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. You can tell I love these games. I adore the Zelda series, and I think every game is good to some degree, but these two are perfect to me. Ocarina is the best standard Zelda experience, and Majora's Mask is the best 3D spin-off, and also the most unique game in the series. For these two being the first 3D games in the series, and this one being developed in under 2 years, these games are so good and have aged brilliantly. They're not flawless, and there's a couple of things that the 3D remakes made better, but these things kind of f***ed up their own kind of shit, and worst of all, they're on the 3DS. Who wants to play games on that in 2023? Not me. Personally, I'm gonna stick to the versions on Nintendo Switch Online. Oh, hold on, I just got soft-locked. And those are the Zelda games for the Nintendo 64. They're some of my favorite games, some of the best of all time, and kinda sorta got butchered when ported to the 3DS, so I'm gonna whine about these next.
Oh, God. Oh, I should have waited longer to start these.